This is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, prophet of esports. The Business of Esports podcast is sponsored by Esports Entertainment Group, a leading esports and online gambling company. For more information, go check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dewalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, Jimmy Barada. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love, the support, the 5-star ratings and reviews. If you haven't done so, go give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, like wherever you listen to our podcast. Even if it's on YouTube, leave a comment. Tell us how much you love the podcast, or maybe how much you hate it, or any feedback you have. It's always appreciated. Or tell your friends about the podcast. That I think we appreciate above all else. Jimmy, just a quick plug. For those of you who haven't bought any Business of Esports merch, go check it out. Businessofesports.shop. There's a lot of fun stuff on there. I recommend the socks, but I'm a sock guy. Jimmy, how's it going?
Not well, Paul. I am having the hardest week ever, as the listeners hopefully know if you tune into our live show, which is right after we record on Wednesday nights. I am giving up Call of Duty. There's too many hackers. It's such a trash game. I'm fed up, and I'm looking for something new to play, and it's so frustrating. So I'm having a rough week. So you are
following all the Twitch streamers. Are you part of this migration to Apex?
I tried Apex. It was unranked, but we had 3 wins back to back. It was a lot of fun. I'm still open to explore other opportunities, but I really did enjoy Apex. I know we got to sync offline and you can give me some tips on who to play with, but I did enjoy it. I gave it a quick try this weekend.
I have a bunch of cracked 16-year-old ringers if you want them to carry you to Predator.
My crew calls that my crew calls that the Jimbo special, when you get carried to a victory.
Oh no, you don't want to be named. That's not something you want to be named after, but it's nice of your friends, I guess. It's an interesting phenomenon, because Warzone was, the thing. I'm curious. Yeah. I don't think it's going to have any impact on Activision Blizzard's bottom line, but there is definitely, at least in the streaming world and anecdotally, like in our little, gaming circles, a lot of movement away from Warzone. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that lasts. Do you think you'll go back? Do you think they're going to fix it?
I don't think they're ever going to develop an anti-cheat, and so I don't. Other than nostalgia, there's a lot of cool games out. We have an awesome guest today. I'm excited to learn more about that property and give them a try as well. I feel like the audience is so rapidly moving, and there's so many awesome opportunities in gaming that if you fail to capture, and again, I would love to hear insight from our guests, who I'm sure we'll bring in a second, but I feel like it's a hard to capture audience because it's constantly moving forward, and I don't know if I'll go back. I haven't gone back to Fortnite. I haven't gone back to WoW Vanilla, WoW Classic. So we'll see.
Once
bigger
Jimmy
and better
is
things.
Gone, he is gone for good.
Dead to me.
I'm gonna introduce our guest in a second here, but there's like this. It's amazing to me. You have Activision Blizzard, 60 billion, 70 billion, whatever they're at market cap wise now, right? $70 billion company cannot make an anti-cheat that works. Like, this is
will not.
Yeah, but the will not's even more baffling, right? Like that makes even less sense to me. I have to believe that they just can't, right? It's technically impossible, because I don't know why they wouldn't do it otherwise. Maybe our guest has answers. Look, I think I fangirled over a few guests in this podcast lifetime. Ian Proulx, who is our guest today, he's the CEO of 1047 Games. definitely one of those people I think I'm going to fangirl over because I think his game is amazing. For those of you who don't know, 1047 Games makes Splitgate. Ian, welcome to the Business of Esports podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Ian, for our listeners who don't know you, I know a lot of them probably have heard of your game. I think I've mentioned it more than a few times on the podcast. But for those who don't know you, your story, would love for you to give our audience a bit about your background, how you got into gaming, what you're focused on now at 1047 Games, what the future looks like. Give us a bit of the Ian story.
Do you want the expedited version or the long version?
No, the long version. But this is a podcast. People come here for the content and the meaty content.
For sure. Yeah, well, so honestly, so if you haven't seen Splitgate yet, the basic idea is it's an FPS game with portals. This is an idea I had literally 10 years ago. I in high school, I played Portal 2 like everybody else, thought it was just the most mind-blowingly awesome mechanic I'd ever seen in a game. But the FPS fan in me really wanted to see, well, okay, I've got this cool mechanic, but what does it feel like? What would this look like in a first-person shooter? And I just constantly had that thought for years, and went to Stanford, studied computer science. I'd always wanted to learn game design and game coding. Actually, it was for my senior project. I asked my advisor if I could kind of under him do an independent study where I learned Unreal Engine 4. So that's what I did, and he approved it. And it all started with kind of this basic premise of a first-person shooter with portals. I just had this vision of like, what would it be like if there's an enemy over there, I spawn a portal behind him, and then I'm shooting him in the back, or you've got the physics where in Portal you spawn it under a cube and the cube falls through. Well, what if I could do that to an enemy and make that enemy drop to his death? Or if I could use my momentum to get to the sniper tower and have an advantageous location. And that was it. That was the idea, and I built it out as kind of this rough student project. And actually it was the weekend before finals. I asked 7 of my friends, will you guys come play test this thing with me? Because up until this point, I've only tested on my own 2 laptops by myself. And, I'm about to have multiple setups during the senior project fair. I have no idea if the thing works on more than 2. I don't know if it's fun. But more importantly, I don't even know if it will run if there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people playing. None of my friends wanted to join because everybody's got finals to study for. But I get them to agree for 45 minutes. They'll come play test this thing. And we ended up playing for 5 hours straight that day. And that was kind of the first, that was the aha moment for me of like, wow, this thing is fundamentally different than anything I've ever played. It's extremely addicting. And, most importantly, portals in an FPS is something that actually works and works really well. And I think what kept us going specifically during those 5 hours was just that kind of easy to learn, difficult to master skill curve. The first hour when we started playing, it was fun because we were just shooting each other and it was cool. But the second hour and the third hour, you start to experiment with the portals, and the group is starting to get more and more creative and just outsmarting each other. And by hour 5, we were literally playing a different game than what we had started playing 5 hours before that. And that was really rewarding to see. There's not many games that have that kind of very high skill ceiling of, extremely easy to pick up, but still so much to learn and grow from. So fast forward. At that point I knew like, okay, I'm on to something. I want to be a game developer. I want to go start this indie game studio and build this thing. I guess a year later, I actually set out to do this full time. And I started it with my co-founder, Nick. Nick and I named the company 1047 Games. 1047 was the address of the dorm that we had lived in where we met. And, we each put in $7,500 of internship money that we had made from previous summers. And that was it. That was the budget, $15K. Hired a couple contractors and just started working on this thing. And of course, over the years, we would go on to get some funding and be able to hire more people than just, the two of us and a couple contractors. But that was kind of the origin story of how this thing got started. And, I'm happy to talk more about that, but I'll hand it back to you for now.
Ian, you mentioned the two of you and the two contractors when I first played Splitgate. So that would have been not the latest, because there's been a boom right in Splitgate right now recently. You hit, what did you hit? Like 300, 200,000, 300,000 concurrent on Steam, something like that?
No, not on Steam. I mean, we're at like 200-ish across all three platforms. Yeah.
But the first time around that I played it would have been what, like about a year ago or a year and a half ago, maybe?
May of 2019 is when we did the soft launch.
Yes. Yeah. And at that time, I think, at least with the group of friends that I play games with, the sort of the shock and awe we had was like a lot of the laughter around the game was, man, 4 guys made this, right? Like literally 4 people made this thing, which was amazing in the context of, AAA games costing $500 million and having studios with, 300 or 400 people. I guess what was in you, like, I'm curious if you can comment just from a business standpoint, even what was the secret to putting out something like that, which arguably had its issues also, but was still a really fun experience and on such a shoestring kind of budget and team.
So I should clarify a couple of things. So we have more than 4 people. We put out a tweet. We have 4 engineers. A lot of people have then said, "Oh, it's a team of 4 total," and so that narrative has formed. I think now we're up to about 30 people total, and 7 engineers as of 2 days ago. We hired another who just started. So we're still very, very small. And 2.5 years ago we were even smaller. But the bottom line is you just got to work hard, and you got to work with great people. And I mean, we're a small team, but we're extremely dedicated. I think it helps that, sometimes being a small team, when you're so close to the product, you can move fast on things. You're not being constantly slowed down by a massive process that's complicated, and you have to get approval from the publisher, and, or you have developers where it's like, this is the only thing you're supposed to focus on. It's like, for us, we're just kind of a handful of guys making an awesome game. And if we want to go do something, like, we just do it, right? Like, if you want to go make a new game mode, obviously we're going to talk about it. But like, I'm the CEO, and we've got a lot of people that everybody reports kind of directly to me to some degree, and so it's a very collaborative process where everyone is sort of wears a lot of hats. It's not just this, like, okay, this low level engineer guy reports to his manager, who reports to the director, who reports to whatever, right? So, being a small team, you can move very quickly, and you can have a lot of influence on the outcome of the game. And I think that allows for a lot of creativity that, it's a double-edged sword. Obviously you can't get as much done if you're 30 people as you can as a 3,000 person team, but you can move quickly, and you can get a lot done if you work hard.
Now, we had Strauss Zelnick on the podcast maybe about a year and a half ago now. And, as you know, he's the CEO of Take-Two Interactive. And his philosophy on game development, I thought, was interesting, which was he doesn't really care about trends. He doesn't really care about what's hot or genres that are hot. Like, his focus really is the game fun? Are we making a fun game with a good story, right? Like, and there was real truth in his words and real honesty, I think, in what he was saying in that sense, and probably why, Grand Theft Auto is still, people still play it like crazy. And do you guys have a similar philosophy, Ian? Like, I'm curious what your take on game development is, and how it's maybe different from others or other indie developers, or.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it's very similar, to be honest, to that. Like, why are we making this game? Well, we're making this game because this is the game that we want to play, right? Like, this is the game that I had an idea 10 years ago that I thought that would be really cool. And that's really what it is. And so, we're constantly just trying to make it as fun as possible. And, my whole team is addicted to it. I'm addicted to my own game. So it ends up working out really well, because it's like, if I stop having fun, I know something is wrong. And obviously, it's not just about does Ian have fun with the game, right? Like obviously, that's not how it is. But again, like that's our team's mentality, and we're very very open to feedback. We're constantly trying to communicate with our community, get their feedback. I mean, if you look at our Discord, it's just all sorts of like feedback, feature requests, bug reports. Like the whole thing is dedicated to how can we improve Splitgate together. So that's been our mentality, and we'll play the game a lot. I mean, almost to a fault. Like there have been times where I play too much, but not recently. I haven't been able to play as much as I'd like. But
So, Ian, can you talk about what happened then the first time around in your mind, right? Like, because when I played the game, I guess 2 years ago now, it was the hottest thing, right? Everyone was playing it. All my friends were playing it, trying it. It was new. It was fun. And then for whatever reason, it sort of petered out, right? It lasted, I don't know, a month or two. Yeah. And then it seems like it just was not part of the conversation. My friends weren't playing it as much. Like I'm a huge FPS guy. I love the game. I thought it was the most novel thing I had ever seen in recent years. The gunplay felt a little wonky. I don't know if it was the gunplay itself or the net code, or it felt a little rough around the edges. But there was something there, right? Like you could tell that there was something really special there. Why do you think it petered out? And historically, games that peter out tend to not have second acts, right? Like very rarely does a game sort of fail, right? Like no one plays it and then reappears 2 years later and is the hottest thing again all over.
Right.
I guess could you take us through a little bit around why you think, like, what were the business reasons around why you think it petered out, and why you guys decided to keep working or bring it back, or like what was some of the behind the scenes thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like this is the question we asked ourselves, right? Like, when we first launched and the numbers started going down, like there was definitely a panic, right? Of like, oh my gosh, oh shit, like what the heck is going on? Like we thought we had this really cool game, and a lot of people told us we did have a really cool game. What we learned very quickly was there's a lot more to making a successful game than making a fun game. You have to have a fun game in order to have a successful game, but you can't just have fun. Like there's so many, especially in free to play, like there's so much more to making a good user experience to keep people engaged and coming back and grinding and having a good onboarding experience, right? Like there's so many different moving parts that we just, I'm not even going to say overlooked, because like genuinely when we launched this thing, like we knew on day one, like we're not going in with the expectation to blow up. Like our thought process from the get-go was we're going to put this thing out there. Internally, we called it our MVP, our minimal viable product. And we're going to learn a ton, and we're going to listen to the community, and we're going to look at the data, and we're going to just see over time. And this is what's going to guide us to make the game successful over time. Did we expect that big of a spike? No. Did we expect that quick of a drop? No. But again, like we didn't go in thinking like, all right, this is it. This is the product, and we're blowing this thing up. It was much more of like, let's roll it out. We're going to learn. And over time, we've learned a ton that has gotten us ready for this position that we're in today. I can, to dive into specifics, there were really two major issues that stood out at launch. And, again, it comes back to when we did this, we were all panicked. And then we asked ourselves the same question, which is, okay, instead of being panicked, why are the numbers dropping, right? What is causing people to quit? People like the game for the most part, but they're still quitting. Why is that? And we noticed a couple of things. The main thing we noticed that was very, very glaring was almost every user, not almost every, it was 59% of users would get obliterated in their first game. And if you got obliterated in your first game, half of those users would not play a second game. And that was pretty eye-opening to us, which was like, oh, wow, like if you get destroyed, it's free to play. And I think that is such a different, we're old school gamers, right? We look at like Halo 2 and Halo 3 for inspiration. And like, if you think about the process of buying Halo 2, that is a very different process and a very different user that you end up with. So when I think of Halo 2, you know, how did I get Halo 2? I asked my mom, "Hey, can you get me this video game for my birthday?" And then a week later, she drives to GameStop, buys the disc, gives it to me. I'm stuck with that game, right? Like, I'm not going to just say, "Oh, I lost my first game, like, I'm done with this," because I can't resell it because it's gone way down in value. It's now a used game. And I've already gone in with the expectation that I'm going to like it because I liked it enough that I asked my mom to get it for me for my birthday, right?
Mhm.
With a free to play game, that's very different. Most of your users do not go in with any expectation. Most of your users, they hear about it and it's free and it's like, sure, whatever, I'll try this thing. Like, yeah, it looks like it could be okay. But if they don't have fun after 5 minutes, they're done, right? Like they screw this game. This game sucks. I'm going back to Fortnite or Call of Duty or whatever. Um, so it's just a very, very different process, and you have to make sure. And this is the first thing we learned is like everybody has to have fun when they start playing the game, and you can't just throw them into the fire, right? Like you have to have a tutorial. That was one of the things we added. So there was a lot of learnings there. And actually, I can keep going if this
Yeah,
is
no, I'm
interesting.
curious that this is
Yeah,
like this is the kind of stuff our audience loves because, we're first and foremost a business podcast. So rarely do we get such an insider view
yeah,
on,
for sure.
what works, what doesn't work with these kinds of business models.
Yeah. Well, so I'll tell you, I mentioned Halo 2 a lot because that's kind
Yeah.
of like my favorite game ever, other than Splitgate now. But one of the things that I loved about Halo 2, I don't know if Paul or Jimmy, were you guys Halo 2 fans?
Yes.
Big time. Big
Big
time.
time.
Yeah. So if I asked you, like, what did you think about Halo 2's ranking system, the 1 to 50 ranking system? Like, did you like that? Do you remember it?
Don't remember it.
Okay, well, a lot of people who grew up playing Halo, like that ranking system has so much nostalgia. I mean, you'll hear Dr. Disrespect and Courage. I have publicly said it's the best ranking system ever. That was
Right.
me. Like I was all in on this ranking system. Best system ever. Super fun, super grindable, super competitive. Um, and so we actually implemented that, and we this was a big selling point of ours, right? Based on just all the positive reaction we'd get. We'd go to a trade show, we'd tell people like, "Hey, we're bringing back the Halo 2 1 to 50 ranking system." And people would literally, like, their eyes would light up and they would say, "Oh my god, thank you so much for bringing this back. I can't believe Halo got rid of it. They're so dumb. Like, it's the best system ever," right? And there is a reason that Halo and everyone on in every single game ever has gotten rid of that and not used it. There's kind of two fundamental problems with the Halo 2 system that we learned the hard way. Um, Basically, the way it works is everybody starts at rank 1, right? So modern systems, you'll start in the middle, you'll do your placements. You'll very quickly, with like Overwatch's Elo system, right? It very quickly figures out, all right, you're above average, you're below average. Let's try to figure out where on the spectrum you are.
Yep.
With this system, you start at rank 1 no matter what. On top of that, it takes a very long time to grind. So there's not this concept of placement matches or like win streaks or anything. It's just very black and white. If you win, you go up a certain amount. If you lose, you go down a certain amount. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. And the end result is it takes dozens of hours to rank up. The reason this is a problem is, 3 days into our launch 2.5 years ago, we got our biggest fans who played 12 hours a day. They would get to rank 30, 40, 50, and then the matchmaker would say, "Okay, your rank is too high. We can't pair you up against a rank 20, so you're just going to wait a really long time to get a game." And this caused a kind of rippling effect because these are our biggest fans, so they would do one of two things. They would either quit the game permanently because they'd say, "Well, this sucks, like I can't get a game anymore," or more often than not, because they like the game, they're not going to quit, they're our biggest fans, they would just make a new free account because it's free. So we'd get our biggest, best players would rank up, rank up, rank up, get ahead of the pack. Then they'd say, "Okay, well, I either have to quit or I'm making a new account." They'd come back in at rank 1, and it was just this constant, never ending cycle of just making games worse and worse and worse and worse and worse for all of the new players. And for a free to play game, for new players, if you get destroyed instantly in your very first game because I'm a rank 1, but that other guy who's been playing for hours is also a rank 1 since he just made a new account. You can see how that is not good. So that was like just this death spiral that was so bad. I mean, we just absolutely were wrong with our kind of judgment of like, oh, this has so much nostalgia. So that was the first thing that we just ripped it out, and we said, okay, as much as we love this thing, and it pains me because I loved that system growing up. We just had to rip it out, and we've got a really good elo system now. We do some clever things to try to really quickly figure out, like, okay, we're not necessarily fine tuning, like, okay, you're a rank 50, you're a rank 1, but we can at least very quickly figure out, like, all right, this guy, he's above average, he's below average, figure it out. So,
But
yeah.
isn't this an issue, Ian, with most free-to-play games, the Smurf issue? Right? Like Apex has this issue. I know when
for sure.
when
For
my friends
sure.
and I play like local LAN tournaments for Apex, and they're
I think the difference is just how drastic it is, right? With all of these elo systems, like it very quickly figures out where you are on that bell curve. With Halo 2's system, it makes no attempt at all. It's
Yeah.
like, sorry, like you're a rank 1 and you're not getting to your appropriate rank for another 30 hours of gameplay. So it was just a very, very never ending rippling effect of like, just, yeah. I mean, I told you, 59% of new users would get obliterated in their first game, and half of them wouldn't play a second game.
Well, I want to talk about that, but anecdotally, I will say on this second go around where I've been playing Splitgate, the matches have felt like they're much closer, they're much tighter, and clearly there's some good matchmaking going on in the background. But it's interesting that you guys did 180 basically on that. The question I have is related here, and it's sort of this fine line between, and I think Fortnite's maybe the best analogy in that it's free to play and that it has a very high skill cap, which I think your game does as well, right? Like the portals makes it so that very, very highly skilled gamers can do some very amazing things.
Yep.
In some ways, though, that in my mind, that creates a challenge, right? And you've alluded to it, which is a really good gamer can do incredible things with Splitgate, whereas a casual gamer who may not grind it 10, 12 hours a day may struggle for a very long time. Now, matchmaking solves some of this problem, but fundamentally, it's like, can you make a game that appeals both to a very casual audience and a very hardcore audience when you have such a high skill cap? Like, and I'll come back to my Fortnite analogy. Like anyone going into Fortnite now, like there are so many cracked 16-year-olds playing Fortnite. Like even for someone who's good at FPS games, it's really hard to be competitive, really difficult to be competitive. And I think it's a consequence of that very, very high skill cap because of the game mechanics. Do you guys think you're going to be able to find that balance, or have you struggled with it? Or,
I mean, I think we have a very good balance, and I mean, I've said this before, but like to me, Rocket League and Fortnite are the most relevant kind of comparisons, where we have that extremely similar skill curve. Anybody can pick it up and have fun, but there is still that extremely high skill ceiling. I mean, I think the important things that obviously skill-based matchmaking is a very controversial topic. It's something we're looking for feedback on. Our philosophy is we want loose skill-based matchmaking. So the way we look at it, it's like, okay, we've learned from our mistakes. We're not going to put a pro player who's the best in the game in the same lobby as somebody who's playing the game for the first time and doesn't know how to portal. But at the same time, we're not just looking for sweaty lobbies where it's like everybody is neck and neck and everybody is a 1.0 kill death ratio. I think we have a good balance, but it's something that is designed such that we can tweak it without requiring an update on the back end. But no, I mean, I think we have a very good balance. I think, it's one of those things where the game has been designed to be very, very easy for anybody to play. It's got, very beginner friendly shooting mechanics. There's not a ton of recoil. The maps, in addition, I mean, this was one of the first learnings we ever had, was when we were designing the first ever map. It's called Outpost. It's no longer in the game, but the first ever map we designed, it was like extremely complicated, very, very portal intensive. We had all sorts of floating platforms. And the thinking was, well, why do you need a bridge when you have portals? You're just going to portal across. But our philosophy now is, well, we want the bridge because having a bridge from point A to point B, the pro player is going to portal across anyway. So having that bridge doesn't take anything away from the top players because they're ignoring it anyway. They're not going to run across it. But at the same time, it allows the beginners who don't yet understand the portals to sort of learn at their own pace. They can play it like it's Halo or like it's Quake or Unreal Tournament. And then the top players can play it like it's Splitgate. And I think, going back to kind of my initial story of like how we got started, that was exactly what we experienced was during that first 5 hours. It was like, we went from playing this game that's sort of a mindless shooter of just like shoot stuff, have a good time, to a very sophisticated game where we're doing a lot of very clever outplays and outmaneuvers. And I think that's what keeps gamers going is seeing that improvement and seeing the game turn from a very simple shooter to a very complicated and interesting shooter.
Was adding, because you added game modes sort of in the most recent iteration, was that sort of a learning from the first go around? Was that something in response to, I'm curious how that factored in, or was that just something you had planned all along?
I don't think there was.
By the way, some of the new ones are really good.
Yeah, I don't think there was a specific learning that made us say like, oh yeah, we should definitely add this game mode. It was more of just like, well, in some cases, it was like just personal. Oh, we should add this kind of game mode, and in some cases, it was the community requesting a game mode, right? Like gun game, right? We'd had a lot of people say, oh, you guys should add gun game. Call of Duty has a gun game. It's super fun. It's casual, but it's kind of semi-competitive. Nice change of pace. So that was something where it wasn't necessarily like, oh yeah, we've learned this, let's now add gun game to address that problem. It was just like, no, the community has requested this. We are fans of it. Let's go do it. And then in other cases, like Takedown, that was something we came up with where it was just trying to think of a game mode that really leaned into the portaling. Portals
First
work.
Original game mode, by the way, I feel like that I've seen in any game in a long time. I don't know if you guys got that from somewhere, but I don't think I had seen it in any other game.
There's a similar-ish version in Diabolical called Wipeout. And so that was definitely something we had looked at. But I think in our game, it's much more about like complementing the portals. And there's also the difference of like when I die, my respawn goes up. When I get a kill, my respawn goes down. So it just has that opportunity for like really high stakes, flip it, turning the tables, right? We're down. I'm the last man standing. I got to survive for the next 20 seconds. So I got to portal like a madman. But then if I can, if you get too aggressive and I manage to catch one of your teammates and kill him, now I've just shaved off 2 seconds. So it really is just a back and forth where you can be way up in the round and all of a sudden be way down in the round, a split second later.
Jimmy, I want you to jump in here. I don't know if you have any questions, but I have a couple that I want to play off of this. I'm going to come back to them. Go ahead, Jimmy.
So many, and I've just been quiet, learning and in awe, honestly. I didn't want to distract the conversation because we have such an in-depth right now discussion of the product itself. What I'm personally amazed by, and probably because of some work that I've done in the past, but is really your ability to listen to your community and to grow that, right? Not just as users of your product, but I mean, your Discord server is wild. 800,000 users, 200,000 that are online right now as we're speaking. I wanted to learn more and talk more about your hooks and successes in capturing that community around your product, but your ability to support them offline, where again, they're not playing right now, right? But they're talking about your product. You mentioned earlier, they're sharing insight, bugs, feedback. I'm just so impressed by your community, honestly. I'd love to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's honestly one of the advantages of like being small for so long is we have gotten to kind of have this base of really awesome super fans that have become our friends. And, so we have kind of built a base of a small but dedicated and loyal and passionate community. and that has a trickle down effect, right? That has, or I mean, as we've grown, I mean, it's getting harder to maintain that. Obviously, like we don't have a personal relationship with 800,000 people, but at the same time, we have hundreds of people that are, well respected in the community that have brought this game to their communities. We've got a partner program with streamers that we've gotten to know really well. Both streamers who have been with us for years, but also new streamers that we've have had a lot of interest, and I've gotten to know personally. Um, I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I think it's just a matter of like us doing the best we can to maintain that kind of small community feel, even as it kind of gets out of control and impossible to manage. It's just about like, okay, well, we know we can no longer respond to every single comment like we used to, but we can still do our best to do Q&As, to ask for feedback, and just make the community feel heard. Because ultimately, like, we are building a game. We're building, for the community, right? Those are the consumers who play this game. So it wouldn't make sense not to interact with them, because they are, they're our biggest fans and they're our customer, and that's who we're building this for.
So,
And
sort
in
of
a lot of cases, they're our friends. I mean, genuinely, like the number of people that I have become very close friends with, especially during the pandemic, where you're not seeing your IRL friends. I mean, it's really awesome, and I've actually hired a bunch of them too. So
hopefully one or two that can give me the Jimbo special if I ask you offline here and once I check out the game. Um, I'm curious, because on the show in the past, especially during certain events, Fortnite's Ariana Grande concert that we talked about last week, different activations and collaborations that you see the bigger players doing with, movies and major brands. I'm curious how you're going to approach, I suppose, that type of service or offering where you are I mean, you guys have an awesome game, right? How else are down the line? What else? How else? Where else? What do you see as far as implementing brands and activations and events, battle? Sorry,
yeah,
I'm kind of fumbling through the question here, but if you follow me, save me from embarrassment on
yeah, no,
unrecorded.
I hear you. I mean, I think like right now we don't take this for granted. I mean, right now we're in an amazing spot where we're growing and we've got a lot of players playing and a lot of hype and streamers. We are absolutely trying to, keep that momentum up. So we're talking to streamers, we're talking to large scale brands, about yeah, and some celebrities too, actually, about doing these kind of partnerships. And obviously, we're not ready to do an Ariana Grande concert. Like, we're a ways away from that. But I think on a smaller scale, there's some really cool things we can do. Nothing to share yet, but just a lot of conversations that are being had that I think could lead to really cool things down the line.
I mean, Ian, that's a good segue, because I think the big thing we haven't talked about is just esports, right? And it's always the hot topic, and more we're seeing games coming out with, basically esports either in mind or being the primary focus, or, claiming that this is esports ready, or, was designed with esports in mind. Did you have sort of competitive play, on a stage in a stadium with, Cloud9 and TSM? Like, was that part of your math at all in developing the game? Did you want an esports scene around it? Was it built for that? Or is this sort of an afterthought?
Um, I mean, yes and no. So, I mean, it definitely is not an afterthought. It's definitely something we've been very mindful of. It just hasn't yet been our focus. So, it's something that we absolutely view as a mission critical part of the long term plan, but not necessarily like day one's long term plan. So where we're at right now, I mean, for 2.5 years, like, we've been very, very active with our competitive community. We've done a lot of community driven tournaments where, it'll be small. It'll be like a 8 person, or sorry, like an 8 team tournament. Actually, we've had some bigger tournaments too, where it was like a 24 person tournament on the amateur and semi pro side, and then 8 pros. But, you know, that's been a learning experience for us as well. As we've been building this out, it's been great to be able to have tournaments and learn and interact with that kind of gamer, but not just focusing on that, because I think there's a ton of value Like we really do want to satisfy both ends of the spectrum, which is not easy to do. I think we have, like we talked about earlier, that nice balance of easy to learn, difficult to master. So we're able to, but right now the focus is servers, right, increasing capacity. But in the short term, it's much more like, okay, let's build out the game plan. Let's get different marketing tools and different features and just all of that stuff. Like let's keep the hype going. We know that esports is down the line. We know it's going to come. We've got on Friday. There's a tournament Boom TV is doing with a lot of influencers, and we've got more tournaments in the future. But it's just one thing at a time.
But from a business perspective, do you feel like a game has to be built for esports to be successful in esports, or do you think it's something that can evolve organically?
I think it can evolve. I think it actually has to evolve organically. I don't think it, I think if you just try to build it for esports, that's just not going to work. I mean, you can't just have a game that focuses on that. And I think the opposite, right? I mean, not to name names, but like, let's face it, a lot of battle royales have a lot of RNG. Is that the most competitive thing? I don't think so. But it still works. It's fun to watch, and on average, the better players are going to do well. That doesn't mean that the best man's always going to win, but it also doesn't mean that it can't be an esport. Like, it's fun to watch.
I just kind of had a vision pop into my mind that this conversation reminded me, if anyone is a South Park fan, with the underpants gnomes, right? There's this episode they would go and steal underpants. They had a business plan. Step 1, collect underpants. Step 2 was blank. Step 3 is profit. And no one knew what step 2 was in the episode. That was the joke. So it kind of seems like your step 1 is users, growing your user base. You mentioned server support and that being an immediate need for you. If not esports, what for you is step 2, or down the line, where are you looking to expand your game from a business level?
Yeah, I mean, blank. To a certain degree. To a certain degree. I mean, I think we're just kind of taking this all in as we go. A lot of, and I'll be honest, like, one of the things that I think we do really well is we're very quick to adapt to what our community wants, right? So there are all sorts of features that I would love to add, but it doesn't make sense for me to add those features if the community doesn't have any interest in those features. So right now where we're at is, we're focusing on, let's get through the next month and next couple months. We've got some cool stuff planned that we're not ready to announce, but like we've got some really cool stuff planned that I think the community is going to be very, very receptive to. But then it's sort of like, okay, well, now let's start talking long term. Do we add a forge mode? Do we add a mod kit? Do we add a big team battle? Do we add a battle royale, right? Like, there's so many different things we could add, but it's ultimately going to come down to, like, what direction is the community guiding us to go build.
Ian Strauss-Zelnick said he was going to save his GTA 6 announcement for this podcast when they were ready. So whatever huge announcement you have next, make sure you'll have to come back to do it.
Okay.
He may have been joking. So, I have one last question, and it's related to your investors and the investment you just raised. You've obviously got some great investors. You have Galaxy, who I think did your last round or led your last round. Human Capital led this latest, correct? $10 million round. So you've got some great, VCs in the mix. Has venture capital money at all, I'm curious how you've looked at it. Has it changed the business for the better? What have been the struggles? What have been some of the upsides? I think, I came from the VC world. I was a tech VC for, 20 years. But I think for a lot of our viewers, venture is still something relatively new to the gaming space and especially to game development. Although it's maybe the hottest place for VCs right now.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you have, dealt with it and how it has transformed your business for better or worse, I guess.
Honestly, I mean, our VCs are amazing. All of our investors are nothing but supportive. It really hasn't transformed how we do things whatsoever. It's just been a resource that we can call upon to well, obviously, like we have more money, so that means we can hire more people. And in the future, when we're ready to start marketing, we'll have more marketing dollars. But really, like genuinely, there's been no pressure to do anything differently. It's just been pure support and help. And, they're always willing to hop on a call, discuss things, intro me to people. Um, you know, they've just been amazing, especially the last couple of weeks where it's just been craziness. It's like jumping through hoops to help Ian, which is awesome. So
That's always good, and I think a lot of people underestimate the value add of a good VC partner. Guys, do you want to move on to some news? Let's talk about some news. We have, I think, a lot of very relevant stories this week. And let's start with, for our longtime listeners of the podcast, everyone knows probably my favorite streamer of all time here. We have none other than Dr. Disrespect in the news. And the doc here, this is not a rumor anymore. It seems this is actual legitimate plan. Dr. Disrespect is starting a game development studio with a twist. And the subheadline here says it plans to partner with mega influencers to create a series of games. Guy, which is Dr. Disrespect's real name, has revealed plans to start his own game development studio. And basically, the whole gist of this for our listeners is that they're going to partner with these influencers, work closely with them to launch the game, to build the game, to design the game, right? The games that these streamers and influencers want to play. Ian, obviously, you know, as the head of a game studio, you have a tremendous amount of insight here, I'm sure. What do you think of Dr. Disrespect getting into the game development sort of sphere? But maybe more generally, how do you look at sort of the influencer effect on games and game development?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super cool to be totally honest. I mean, I think it's sick that an influencer is I mean, it builds the Dr. Disrespect brand beyond just a guy who's funny in streams, right? Like he's doing really cool stuff. And I think it's really clever actually because I think, influencers have a ton of, I mean, hence the name, but they have a lot of influence over what people play. I mean, if you look at Apex's launch strategy, right? It was pretty much all influencers blowing this game up and building hype. I don't think you have to rely on influencers. I mean, our strategy has been much more on just kind of, organic and building a game over time. But if you can kind of get ahead of the curve and say, okay, well, we're going to make a game for this influencer based on the demand of these very, very important users. I mean, if you can execute, that's a pretty good formula for success.
It's something I meant to ask you. Have you not gone down the path? Because I haven't seen a bunch of streamers playing Splitgate, right? Like I haven't seen Tim the Tatman playing it, or have the influencers become too cost prohibitive? And does that therefore, like for a smaller studio, and therefore maybe Dr. Disrespect has a tremendous advantage here?
I mean, they are expensive, but they add value, right? So like, it's hard to say. Like, we haven't done any sponsored streams for this. Like, our beta has just purely been organic, and we've been very fortunate to kind of, as people are moving away from Call of Duty and other games, I think we do kind of fill a void at right place, right time. So a lot of streamers have picked up our game, but I mean, you can't just, I don't know. You have to have a good game is the bottom line. And there's different ways to promote that good game. And the fact that Doc is going to have those connections and he's going to make a game for those influencers, like that is definitely an advantage. But at the end of the day, like, when you get the eyeballs, which it sounds like he will be able to get, I mean, of course he will, it's just about execution.
Jimmy, can I ask you a question on this? Can I play a bit of devil's advocate here? Because I'm a huge fan of the doc, so it's hard for me to like not just love on this. But like, is Doc's brand at this point so valuable that this is too big of a risk, right? That games and what people think are fun games is just too hard to predict. And if there's a good chance that this game sucks, or whatever game he puts out first sucks, and it's just, it sort of is is a big negative to his brand. Like a doc movie is sort of safe, right? Because it's not gaming. If it sucks, it falls into sort of the camp or like kitschy kind of like category. It would have a cult following forever. But like no one would fault him for it, right? If whatever game he comes out with sucks, does Doc recover from that?
I think Doc himself, with his brand, with him playing, we had talked earlier about me jumping title to title, not really looking back. If Doc comes out with a bad game and it just completely is a failure, he could go back to playing another game. I think the
Like,
the
how do you write
developer,
that off, right?
I
Because
think so again, there's a difference here. It's the different games that he's going to put out after the first flop that might take the hit. But I think his personal brand, in terms of him streaming, going back to
Yeah.
streaming another FPS, that's unaffected.
Well, I also, just to chime in, like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like he's just a random influencer, right? Like Doc is still, like, he has experience. He used to be a level designer.
Mhm.
I think also a lot of these influencers, they do understand gaming, like they do it for a living. So I think it's less of a concern that he comes out with a bad game. Like I think he will most likely come out with something good. It's just, as I've learned, there's so much more to creating a successful game
Yeah.
than just making a good game, that I think, there's definitely a scenario where he has to go through the same learnings. But I think in that scenario, if he makes a good game and it has a spike and it doesn't end up taking off like we hope it does, I still think that there's a scenario where that doesn't. I don't think that hurts his brand. I think if he did make a bad game, that would hurt his brand. But I think Doc's gonna know how to make a decent game, at least, right?
Yeah.
I also think his brand, I'm sorry, but I also think
No.
his brand is the kind that if the game isn't great, there's a lot of memes and other content. Maybe he streams it on the toilet again, or something like that, right? Like where
Yeah,
Doc's brand
right.
can
He could
can
make a
recover
joke
from
out of
that.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to recover from a flop. There's a lot more upside than there is, I think, risk here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It is a risk, though.
But does that potentially change? Because the big thought I have is, does it begin to change the industry in a significant way where the influencers that he's working with, I'm assuming, will have some kind of economics tied to the game, right? It's not going to be just like a fee to pay to play the game. I'm assuming, right? I don't know. But I'm assuming there are economics that are tied to whatever influencers he brings sort of under the umbrella to help work on the game or give. And essentially then they become owners, or, they have some equity, or they have some participation,
Yeah.
right? Does that then, again, does it raise the price of sort of influencers' participation where, now, Ian, if you go to an influencer a year from now or 2 years from now and Doc's got this sort of machine going and it's going well for the influencers he's working with, now they're expecting, hey, I want to be cut into this if I'm going to be a critical part of the success here.
Yeah. I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I think you're totally spot on. Like, if this is a success, it's going to be a big deal, right? Like, if he actually, like, that could change the industry, right? Because now you have this just totally different dynamic, and already to begin with, right? And this is something we're seeing. Like, people want to root for us because we're the small team. People don't want to root for the big faceless corporation, right? And I think if you start having influencers involved, like, you have fans that go into this hoping that whatever game they're playing is going to succeed. So I think it's definitely I think it could work really well, but at the end of the day, you still have to execute. If you don't make a good game that has all the bells and whistles to keep people retained, then the hype and kind of influencer relations can only last so long.
So speaking to that, and something that I want to look at further is, the more you use these influencers, the more people know that these opinions are paid for, right? So I think there's something to be said in terms of, for example, with Splitgate, in your purely organic growth, if an influencer comes out now and hypes you guys up, everyone knows that's a genuine opinion.
Yeah.
Versus, I think that's the truer or the quicker hurdle, at least, or the more immediate problem I see is, the more influencers Doc has on his roster, the more they talk about this game or that game or the next game, the fewer people I think will continue to listen, and maybe he's going to need to cycle through different influencers. Or to your point, the game really does need to be even above average because it's already getting it's like when someone overhypes something for you and then you experience it and yeah, it was pretty good, but like I would have liked Hamilton a lot more if everyone wasn't bragging about it, before I saw
Yeah.
it. I would have thought it was way better,
It's
but it was
true. It's
overhyped
That's
for me.
funny.
So that's kind of what
I
I'm
had the
seeing
same
here.
reaction. So
Yeah.
like the first time I saw Hamilton, I was like, "What's the big deal?" Like everyone's telling me this is the greatest thing ever, and I was like, "It's good."
Yeah.
But then actually, I did the second time I watched it, I was like, "Okay, I really do like it." But still, like to your point, you have such high expectations. So
And Ian, maybe was working in your favor, right? On that, like the whole mythos around the four guys, right, that made this game 2 years ago
yeah,
was maybe why we got all like really hyped up about it, right? There was part of that maybe.
oh, I mean, we're the underdog. Everybody wants to root for the underdog, right? And
Yeah.
whether it's 4 or 30, like it doesn't make a difference because we're nothing. Like we are so tiny, and even right with $10 million, it's like that's great, but that is nothing compared to Fortnite or Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Like it's huge. I mean, it allows us to really take this thing to the next level and hire more people and build the team out. But again, it doesn't just mean okay, overnight, cool, got $10 million. Like we did it, guys. Like no.
Guys, let's move on to another quick story here, and this one is from VentureBeat. AviaGames raises $40 million to diversify mobile skill-based gaming. So AviaGames raised $40 million, basically to build games where players can compete against each other for cash prizes. Maybe the best known company in this space is Skillz. They went public in December. I mean, their stock has taken a real beating, but very well-known public company in this space. What I wanted to touch on here, Ian, primarily is, the mobile space and mobile gaming developers, whether they're skill-based ones or more traditional ones, or, ones that are focused on betting or player versus player betting. They've attracted a huge amount of investment dollars, massive, right?
Mhm.
And the trend in game studios has been buying mobile game developers and, releasing mobile versions of their flagship games. And last week we had, Chief Pat from Tribe Gaming, which was a purely mobile esports team, right? So like mobile, in a world where I'm a hardcore PC guy, Splitgate being PC only, or no, you're on more platforms now, but I originally PC only.
Yep.
What is your thinking around mobile? How do you look at it? I know you guys are still small. You're still early. Is mobile on your radar? Is it an opportunity that you're looking at? And I guess, what do you make of the broader trend here with AviaGames, where they're, I would argue, raising the bulk of the investment dollars, are going towards mobile game developers more than anything else?
Well, so to start, I guess as a gamer, I used to be very anti-mobile gaming. I then played Call of Duty Mobile, and I actually became a believer. Like that was the first game where I was like, "Wow, this is actually really fun." Like I would play this game. Um, so I think like that has changed my perspective with Splitgate as well. Like 2 years ago, if you asked me like, "Oh, will Splitgate come to mobile?" I would have said, "Oh no chance." But I think that there is a way you can get it right. It's definitely not just porting everything over. It's a lot of work to get it right for the mobile version, but it's definitely something I would strongly consider. And I mean, I'd love to do it. I think we could do it well, and actually make it fun. Um, in terms of sorry, what was the second half of the question?
Just the broader trend where, we're seeing mobile game developers attract the lion's share of investment dollars.
Yeah, yeah. So I think mobile is a safer bet in general. Just the nature of like mobile gaming, it's much less hit driven. Um, it's much more data driven, and you have your metrics and what's your cost per install, how much money do you make on average per user. Um, So there's a little bit less luck and less randomness and reliance on things that are out of your control, like influencers. So I think that's why for a VC, like that's a safer bet. But I think that is the direction that PC games are going to have to go in. That's the direction we are going in, is becoming much more data driven, and I think that's helped us come a long way.
Sorry,
Sorry,
Jimmy, go
Paul,
ahead.
if I could
Yeah.
jump in, I just, this is not a direct application, but a step in that direction, I suppose. I'm curious, Ian, your perspective on the Steam Deck and how you see that affecting your product, because, now we're getting away from mouse and keyboard and going to, controller, even though you could play the Steam, your title on the Steam Deck. It's not exactly mobile, but I feel like there's enough overlap here where I'm curious your perspective of the Steam Deck and how that will affect your product versus mobile being, I suppose, the third application.
Yeah, I don't know. I need to look more into it, to be honest. I mean, I think like I can tell you, like, our goal is to be available on everything. I would love to get Splitgate on mobile, Nintendo, Steam Deck, Google Stadia, Epic Game Store. Like, like truly, like my view of how I want to run this is like, let's just put it on everything, right? We're on Linux. Let's come to Mac. Like, there's not a lot of Mac users, but why not? So that's where I'd like to be eventually. So, play anywhere, play on any device.
Guys, that wraps up this week's podcast. I will say, Ian, I'm going to leave on this one note. Here's my bit of community feedback. Okay, I'm wearing a shirt, which everyone can go buy, businessofesports.shop. But it's my simple view on the success of gaming. It says GAAA, which stands for Gamers Against Aim Assist. And and as a mouse and keyboard guy, this is the apocalypse coming with aim assist in all these games. And so I asked just one, from one humble gamer to you, that we minimize aim assist or leave it out altogether if we could.
Well, I don't think we can leave it out, because I think then you would just have 0 console players playing the game. I will say kind of our approach to aim assist, and again, like, this is something that we are absolutely looking for feedback on, but it's kind of hard to get good feedback because controller players are never going to tell you that it's too much, and mouse and keyboard players are always going to tell you it's too much. I do think we have a very good balance right now, though. We sort of looked at Halo and Apex, and we said, let's do what they're doing, and then let's dial it back 15%. I think we've done that pretty well. I can tell you, like, from the pro tournaments we've done for 2.5 years, most players are on mouse and keyboard other than a few. So it can be done. But to me, that says, well, okay, at the top level, like, it's pretty well balanced. It is viable to do either, but more viable to do a mouse, realistically. So I think that's a good balance. But, again, we're always looking for more feedback.
I think the portals save you guys. I think that will make it, more feasible for mouse and keyboard to remain sort of the dominant form in that game for longer.
Although I'll tell you, one of the pro controller players, his portaling ability is pretty scary. Like, it's not as good as, like, the top mouse portaler obviously is better than the top controller portaler, but he plays on, like, high sense, and he does some crazy things with a controller. And
I am scared to see Splitgate pros like 2 years from now. It's going to be absolutely nuts what they can do with the game. So, Ian, thank you for being on the podcast. Congratulations, obviously,
thank you guys so much
on all the success. Just for anyone, if you want to be found, or where people can follow, like, where can they follow you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'd say I previously I would have said join our Discord, but it's 800K cap. So I'd say follow us on Twitter. It's just @Splitgate. And if you haven't played the game, I mean, it's on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. It's free, so go download it.
And from a lot of our audience are business people. I don't know if you care to have them follow you personally, or you can.
I am off social media. I've deleted it all. I'm on LinkedIn, but
there you go. So thank you again, Jimmy. Thank you as always to our listeners. Don't forget, every Wednesday evening we do a live stream. It happens after we tape the podcast. It's Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. We cover all the news that didn't make it into the podcast. It's a lot of fun. It's interactive. We get to do it with you guys. So show up for that. Also, don't forget businessofesports.shop. Go get some cool merch. And as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in every week. And we will see you guys next week.